Well, San Francisco, episode 14, Jack Altman.
We made it a year, everyone.
For all the haters and losers.
Yeah, all the haters and losers.
So we're talking to Jack Altman, very impressive, founder, CEO of Lattice for a long time, recently transitioned to VC where he has a $150 million fund.
And the founder of Alt Capital.
Yep. And we're excited. This is like the perfect persona of the IO, someone who's invested, someone who's operated, done both.
At the same time and sequentially.
That's right. And just very excited for the learnings.
Yeah, most investors, the ones who have started companies, are not like unicorn status. Jack's done it. He started it. He scaled it. He's been through the ups. He's been through the downs. And now he's started a firm as well. You guys are going to hear his full Lattice story. You're going to hear fundraising during ZERP. You're going to hear like learning how to invest. And I think this is one of our best conversations of the last year. So
Agreed.
Enjoy. So this is episode 14 of the IO podcast. We're here at Alt Capital's headquarters here in San Francisco with Jack Altman. Thanks for joining us, man. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to do this with you.
We're going to cover a bunch of stuff. We want to get through your story, your background, how you ended up where you're at. We'll talk about some hard-earned lessons at Lattice, and now you've started your own fund with its own, I don't know if you call it an accelerator, incubator program. We'll talk through that, and then some hot takes at the end. Sound good?
Great.
All right, so maybe we kick it off with the first one is tell us your story. How did you end up in San Francisco originally and in tech? And then we'll dive into a couple things, but I just want people to get to know who you are.
Yeah, I grew up in St. Louis.
The hotbed.
The hotbed of technology.
And venture.
Yeah, 1989, that's where it all started.
Absolutely.
I didn't know anything about tech or anything like that growing up. I went to a public school, K through 12. I loved my childhood, actually. Like, it was just like this very, sort of looking back, it was this very kind of like quaint, bubbly experience. And I think that was like a really positive thing for me. Then I went to school, still was not thinking about tech, worked in banking in New York for a year after school. And then I moved out here in 2013 to join, I don't know if you know Teespring.
I heard of Teespring, yeah. It was like a coastal company originally, right?
Yeah. In Andreessen. And it was a super cool company, a ton of talent there.
Was Deli on there from Founders Fund? Am I right there?
Yeah,
okay.
He was there. The founders, Walker and Evan, were awesome. Bunch of people from the team I still talk to, and it was just like an awesome group. And it was basically doing like an e-commerce marketplace. But anyway, growth there was super quick. Like, the company scaled from 10 to 300 people while I was there in less than 2 years, kind of thing. A lot of lessons learned in there. But worked there, and then that was where I also met my co-founder of Lattice.
What was your role?
I started as like just sort of an IC on the growth because there were just not that many of us.
Okay.
And then by the end, I had become the sort of VP of biz dev and corp dev and sales. So I was running a few orgs at the end.
Cool.
And that was a cool experience to like, because I got there early and it grew really fast. I got to become a manager and a manager of managers. That helped a little bit starting, I think nothing really prepares you for starting a company, but there are like some skills you can pick up so that when you're now in it, 10 out of the 30 things you need to know. There's this ridiculous list as a founder of things you need to figure out one way or another. It was helpful to have been a manager before, for example.
How did you pick Teespring? Because that's like you said, kind of an ideal education. You scale super fast. You have a bunch of different roles, like you climb the ladder, all that stuff.
Yeah.
How did you pick that company, or was it one where you kind of got lucky, like you didn't know what to look for? Because that's a common theme for people, is how do I know the right company to join to get the experience to eventually do what I want to do?
Totally. And there's a lot of luck to it. And, and it didn't turn out to be Stripe. It wasn't joining Stripe, but it was like a company where I got enough exposure and enough surface area to learn a lot of things, and to get an interesting network. It was a lot of our early hires for that. So it did turn out to be a very helpful start. And actually, even the fact that it wasn't, maybe take the contra on what I just said. I think you can join a company that is so successful that it actually makes being a founder harder.
Yeah.
Because all you know is this 99.99 percentile experience.
Yeah.
And then when you go from, being in this unbelievable situation to now going into the woods with a machete and nothing, it's like
you forget that that's the default and that your job is to not make it that way.
Yes, you forget that ripping product market fit is not a premise on top of which you build these things, but that it itself is this unbelievably rare and hard thing to get and all that goes into it. So I think it actually in some ways was like a Goldilocks type of company for that. But it was already in very solid, even though it was a small team and it was early, the numbers were crazy. It had clear product market fit for a thing it was, building, and there was obviously going to be growth. Yeah. And so there was, to me actually, when I'm advising, a friend who wants to, join a company rather than start a company or, to me, I think joining a company as early as possible post clear product market fit is the highest career benefit usually.
100% agree. So magic question then is like, how do you define that? How are you telling them like, hey, this looks like they have product market fit, or you can be more definitive saying, hey, they've got it.
Pretend you've got a friend listening right now. How would you tell them to pick the right company? Because they might agree with the premise, pick a post product market fit, but how do I know?
Yeah. And I think it depends on who you're giving the advice to and what their current level of sophistication to that question is. Like, there's some people who you could just say you got to join something post product market fit, and they would have the experience to know how to look in under the hood and say, okay, at a SaaS company I should be seeing this, and a consumer company I should be seeing that. If it's enterprise, it's this, whatever. If somebody comes in very cold, to the space and to understanding that, I would say like, find some people you trust and help them make that call for you. On the product market fit side. And then the other side that I think the person can decide for themselves is like, it takes great founders to build great companies. And like, you need to work with founders that you believe are going to go very far. Like, don't join a company where you can't see the founders going far.
So was it while you were at Teespring that you decided I'm going to be a founder? Or like, when did you know that was going to be my path? I'm going to be a founder of a company.
Yeah, I think even when joining Teespring, I had the thought like, gosh, I'd love to start a company. And for one reason or another, probably partially, I was like, I just don't quite feel like I've got the chops yet. But I also was like, I don't have a real co-founder for this, or I don't have, like, I'd have to go founder.
Did you have the idea already?
No.
Okay.
No, I had not. And then that was the other thing. Yeah. I had no unique insight. I had no idea. And I think I basically was like, I don't want to force a startup. And I just like didn't believe that was like going to be a credible path. I had read, PG's stuff, and I was like, I just don't think that's how I want to do this. So I joined a company, but I think from the moment I joined, I think I had the aspiration.
Okay. So I think we should talk Lattice then, and the insight. Like, how did the insight come about? You said you met your co-founder there, which, by the way, that's one of the main benefits of doing what you just recommended, is your network of exceptional people expands so that you can start a company. Perfect example. Yeah. Where did the insight come from? I mean, it's a tricky space to break into. How did you come up with it?
Yeah, and it's fun. The first insight we had contained the problem, but not the solution. So we were correct on that something was broken, but we didn't know how to solve it yet, and our first try was wrong. The problem that we felt was basically that inside a company, once you get past a certain number of people, the culture will not do well, management will not scale, things will start to deteriorate unless you do all of these unnatural things to build infrastructure for people management. And on top of that, we could feel that the old way that people were, trained on doing management and the old way that companies were being built was just not jiving with Silicon Valley in 2015 when we started. And bringing like the Jack Welch energy into Silicon Valley was like not it. And it just like was not how people were doing things. There are some companies, and there's like, maybe to take an intense extreme example of management, like Bridgewater, just like really interesting management stuff. It just doesn't port over to the average tech company where you've got, millennials, I guess, then millennials, and which were mid-20s people. And so we could just feel something was like not clicking. And we're like, there's got to be a new set of things. We started in the wrong area, it turned out, for us.
Where did you start? What was was the wrong area?
The place that we saw something sort of busted in the company operations system was around goal setting.
Okay.
Where you do this quarterly goal setting process.
So were you thinking OKRs originally?
That was what we did.
That's what you started with. That's right.
That was
Okay.
the first product, and we spent 6 or 8 months kind of hacking at that. And the thing is, there was good like problem market fit. So it was really easy to get leads. It was really easy to get people to try the product. And it was even easy to get, you know, a CEO of a 200 person company, which was big at the time for us, you know, with just, you know, me and a co-founder hacking out a product. It was easy to get them to even roll it out, but then it didn't stick. Like, it didn't actually solve the problem. And I actually still to this day, I just don't think that software is what solves OKRs. I think it's like a people problem. And by the way, that leads me to, like, you know, a whole set of things I think about some companies where they have indeed identified a problem, but that doesn't mean that software is the answer to every problem that's been identified. And so that was where we started, but it just had no retention to it. And we could just feel that after.
You could get people signed up, they would actually pay you, but they'd all churn.
Yeah.
You and probably see it in the usage.
Or
like
they would try it. Maybe they wouldn't even pay us a lot. Although a great sales team, and actually maybe this was a benefit to us, a great sales team was capable of selling an OKR product for 6-figure ACVs to enterprise customers. And we might have gotten, and you know, this is actually the first time I've thought this through, but I think in some ways we were saved by the fact that we were not good at sales. And so we were not able to push a low PMF product into the market. But a more experienced salesperson would have been able to. And there were examples that did.
Fascinating. So this was during the first 6 to 8 months. Did you know you didn't have PMF yet? Or were you like faking yourself to believe that we've got it?
At first.
And then talk about the pivot and what changed.
At first, I kind of thought we had it. So we did YC, you know, we had started in 2015. We did YC that January 16. And during YC, we had a graph where we were signing up users. It was up and to the right. And I was like, maybe we've got it. And then it was 3 months, 4 months in, we couldn't get them to run their second quarter. And we couldn't quite get them to pay what we wanted them to pay. And, you know, we just couldn't get the adoption. And so then in that second quarter, I was like, all right, maybe there's some work to do. Maybe we need some more features. We got to like find the thing that's going to get it there. And we kept shipping features and nothing really worked. And so somewhere in that second quarter, after having been live with customers and feeling the excitement of getting people on, and then they're not really staying, that was when it was like, all right, this isn't working.
So what'd you do?
Well, we freaked out, and then we tried a second product.
Which was what?
That was a one-on-one.
Okay. So OKRs to one-on-ones.
Yeah.
And did you keep the OKRs thing, or you were just doing the one-on-one?
Kept it.
Okay.
And we even did a smart thing, which was the one-on-ones included your OKRs so that you could reference your goals in your weekly one-on-one.
Yep.
And that product got much better usage. So that was good. So we're like, okay, this is feeling a little bit better. And it was an easy product to build. And it was like we were able to build it quickly. We could tell it wasn't going to be like a big thing. We could tell it wasn't like foundational. But we were like, okay, there's some more usage and stuff here. But we were like, all right, we're warmed up. Now we got to keep going. And that was when we got to the product that worked. And it was also actually when we got to the insight that worked. So one of the things we were doing at this time, which was very helpful, was even though we didn't have product market fit, I would say that summer we were starting to get like real customer relationships where like I had become friends with like 10 VPs of people, like texting, like, knew what they cared about and what they were interested in, and like went for walks and coffees and stuff, and we were like buddies. And I think I was getting to a place where I was like, all right, I can be super vulnerable. What we've got is kind of cool, but like, what else? What are we not seeing? And we could sort of feel that there was not that long of a list of things at the time. And we had seen a couple companies in this space that were building this new version of performance reviews, and we started asking our customers about that. And then we got this very strong inclination with a much stronger thesis than we had had previously that this performance review thing mattered and was going to be real. Basically what the insight on that one was, which was like, I would say the first time we actually had an insight, was that there was a way people wanted to do performance management, and it looked very specific. It was, they wanted to do it multiple times a year. They wanted to do 360s. They wanted anonymous feedback. They wanted it to be lighter weight. They wanted certain types of customizations they could, but there was like a spec. Like people had this spec, and it was a new spec. And if you went to SuccessFactors or Taleo or Workday or whatever there was before, you couldn't do it in those systems. So there were customers saying, we want this specific thing. We're sure we want this specific thing. And we cannot get it in the old systems. They're just not built that way. Like, all right, we see that. Basically just built that and started telling a story around it. And immediately it worked. Like there was no doubt even 2 weeks before we launched, because I was selling mocks. I knew people wanted this thing. So that was, and then it worked.
I laughed like 3 or 4 times during this, because if people have listened to other episodes, you've heard a few themes there that I'll repeat. One was, you actually felt like it was a real insight this time, as opposed to a forced insight the first time. Another one was, on the original version, you kept shipping features, but it didn't change things. And that's an Andy Rachleff quote, that when you launch, a lot of times founders are thinking, if I just get the next feature in, that's not the case, because features don't solve for the desperation.
That's right.
The other thing I heard from you is, Sterling's got this phrase people laugh at of, you have to be, was it a truffle pig?
Truffle pig for opportunity.
Like this pig that sniffs out desperation and opportunity. And what I heard from you there is you started to get to know these founders, and the desperate problem they had was around performance management.
Well, and then another thing Tyler and I talk about all the time is the framework for successfully finding product market fit is sell, design, build.
Yes.
So when you had your mocks and people are buying the thing that doesn't exist yet, pretty good indicator that you're onto it, right?
Is that a fair summary?
It's completely fair. And to this point, and there's a category of thing that doesn't, where this whole, everything that we're saying is wrong. But for a SaaS company, this is like almost always right in my view, where like, for a SaaS product that is like, let's just be, a little negative on it, to say like for a CRUD app, people believe that you can build it. And so if you can't say to somebody, hey, we're going to build this thing. Here's pictures of the thing from Figma that we made. It's going to do this. Either you don't want that thing or you don't believe us that we can't do that thing. But if you believe us and you want it, then like, let's transact now. And people will, they may not transact the money, but they'll say, yes, I'm going to buy that thing. I'm happy to sign on whatever thing now. And that was what we got when we did that. And that was,
Would they buy you? Would they pay you now?
Or were they signing letters of intent?
LOIs?
Or like, how did you know?
They were just like, we will sign this. And we were like, we're 2 weeks away. They're like, we'll sign that thing. As long as all they cared about was that they're like, we have a performance review that needs to run on October 8th. And
they're pushing you.
This better be
so good.
This better be ready. But also I was like, oh, wow. They're a little mad. This is great. They care enough. And they're like, this thing better be ready by that date. I've never heard that before. I just, that's so different than, sure, I'd love to try that out. Like, send me a login and I'll poke around tonight after work.
Totally.
That's bad. That's not product market fit.
Can you be ready for us by this date? Because we need to, it's
and
very
it must
different.
do X, Y, Z. Can you promise it'll do those things? I need it. So different. When we launched the first performance reviews on this thing, we hadn't even built out the ability to close the performance review. So it's like, this performance review is a process that you go through that has a start, middle, and end, tons of steps. We hadn't built the back half of it. So people were getting on the roller coaster where the back tracks were not built.
And they didn't care because it was a desperate problem.
Well, and this is...
Well, they cared, but
they were
they
like,
still
you better
used
finish it. And we didn't fully,
This is the difference of... Because I think the nuance is so finite that people get it wrong a lot. Because with the first thing, you're building features, trying to make it more valuable. But there's a different thing where the features are like getting pulled out of you, but they're still using the thing, right?
Yes.
And so, but you got to know which one you're in. Are you getting features pulled out of you and they're using it, or are you trying to get features to get them to use it in the first place?
The other thing with SaaS is, and this goes back to like the OKR thing, which is easy to get people to run once. It's very hard to get them to run it a second quarter, a third quarter. It's nearly impossible to get them to run it, let's say, a 30th quarter in a row.
OKRs suck so bad.
OKRs, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's
well, is that an objective or a key result? Let's talk about that.
Does that really ladder up? It's tough. It's challenging.
It is.
But you just need a spreadsheet and alignment. I mean, a tool has value to put them in when connected to a performance review. But in terms of a way to organize a company's work, it's not that much additional help. In most cases, I think it's more about the individual and their growth and just like people directionally knowing what's going. It's about the 80-20 of like, do we know what the priorities are? Are we aligned to the company? Great. Do I know what's expected of me? Great. That's like what you need. You don't need this perfect orchestration. But a SaaS company is, unless you've got a thing that people are going to use 10 years from now, you're never going to build an enduringly valuable SaaS company. And like that is, you've got to solve a problem.
Well said.
That it must work that way or you'll never get there.
Yeah, the whole point is to have a recurring customer for a decade.
A decade.
That makes sense.
And I think when you reorient that way, and then you think about, is my problem that I'm solving right now, like maybe I can sell this thing, maybe I can push it, maybe someone's got something important, but I have, in order to build a foundational part of the software ecosystem at any scale, my customers need to stick with me for a decade.
Yeah.
Like that's what it really comes down to.
All right, so you find it, you see this desperation, things start growing, and you know you've got it. How was it after that? What did your problems shift to then? Because then the second part of a CEO's job is to scale this thing.
Yep.
Did you like that stage as much, or was it? You did.
My favorite stage probably was like between 20 and 150 people or something like that. Just in terms of just the experience of that phase, I think was the most joyful for me.
Because you're out of the valley of death. You've got something that works.
Yeah, and you've got, the best moments when it were, and we had a bunch of these in different ways in different times, but when you feel like you've got a secret as a team, when you are sure, and you can see it in your own data, and you can see it in the customer reactions, you're like, we know something for sure, and we know that the whole world doesn't know it. And teams really feel that way. And when a whole team has that energy, it's a really powerful experience. Yeah. There's kind of nothing like that.
Mm-hmm. And you're still small enough that you're like, David, taking on the world, but you've got some of the resources and some of the talent. I think that's a special time in company building.
Yeah, you're kind of getting out of the zone where every little thing is a ruthless trade-off.
Yeah.
And where you can like walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you have 15 engineers, not 3.
Yep.
And so you don't have to say, do I want to do my first, second, or third priority? You can like choose how to allocate those 3, and you're not going to do priorities 4 through 30, but like you can do a few things at once.
So how did you think about fundraising during this time, and as a founder, like how did you, and you're raising, for the first time, and how did you think about VC as a part of you building Lattice?
Well, we were terrible. Terrible at fundraising until we weren't. The first time we weren't terrible at it was our Series C. There were a couple of problems. I think I was not, a master fundraiser, and I got better at it over time, obviously, but I didn't come out of the gates just like.
And what was it? Was it the storytelling? Was it like the positioning? Like, was it who you're talking to? What did you feel like you got better at over time?
Oh man, there's a lot of things probably. I think I had some attributes coming in that are still driving attributes of mine that I needed to not fix to be a better person, but that I needed to fix to be a better CEO. That was also one of the things I don't think being the person you want to be and being the CEO you want to be, unfortunately, are not always the exact same thing. That's something I always like struggled with. Not that I think you have to not be
who you are.
Yeah, but like there are things where I'm like, all right, me acting natural here is objectively unhelpful.
What's an example for anyone who's listening? You're saying like you're too nice of a guy?
Or are you saying that because we've been talking for 20 minutes now and you're understated, right? Like you're maybe a little more reserved and humble, and sometimes you need to be brash and, say ridiculous things. Is stuff like that?
That is one, yeah. And so like if you're in a fundraise and you think you're going to make it from, 2 to 6 this year.
Yeah.
And, there are some founders who will pitch that as, we're going to make it from 2 to 10 and we're going to push hard and I don't need your capital, and that elicits a certain reaction in a VC. And they're like, I'll deal with this later, when I don't hit 10.
They want to see the crazy.
And then I was like, look, I'm pretty sure we can get to 4.5. I'm a 5.5 is a stretch. I think there's a world where we get to 6, and then we blew the year out and got to 7 or whatever. But that's not helpful in a fundraise objectively. It's just not. And, over time, it's very helpful once they're on your team. Yeah. Being extremely truth oriented once everybody's on the same side.
That's a good lesson.
Is very helpful.
Well, but let's keep going. So what is the learning? Is the learning to exaggerate and fundraise?
No.
Okay.
Not for me.
Okay.
It is to know things about yourself and to stay true to who you are, but to figure out how to work within that to say, all right, I know that I'm going to undersell, and I know that I'm going to be the type to underpromise, overdeliver. And I know that VCs work this way, and I know that I just met this person and they don't know this about me.
Yeah.
So what can I do? An example of what you can do is to say, hey, I'm going to show you some updates though, where 18 months ago, I said we were going to make it here. We
Yeah.
actually blew that out.
I love that.
You know,
Yeah, that's great.
And and you can even
It's actually leaning into your strength.
exactly.
You're not changing who you are. I think that's the key.
That's how I see it.
Lean into your strength.
But you had to know those weaknesses about yourself in order to identify ways to kind of overcome them.
Yes,
right?
I think self-awareness is like a top 3 trait you need to be good at anything. But as a founder, I put that like, you know, everybody you got to be hardworking, you got to be smart, you got to be whatever.
Yeah.
But I think self-awareness is like the gift that keeps on giving and lets you do all this other stuff.
I don't know that founders have so much delusion. How often do you find them to be like self-actualized and aware?
The best founders that I've ever gotten to invest in have been self-aware, actually.
Okay.
I think there's both. There's the delusion, but I think even the delusional ones are like
Aware that they're delusional?
yeah, or maybe they would maybe say it differently.
Okay.
And there's degrees of all this, and there's different types. I'm a certain way,
Yeah.
and there's other people who are a certain way, and so it's not all the same. But my experience is that even the type that you're talking, like maybe let's say a nicer word than the delusional version, like reality distorting
Yes.
field
Yep.
type
Yep.
of people,
Totally.
whatever. I think those people in a quiet moment on real reflection, if you caught them, you know, out of the element of work, would say like, yeah, I know I push
Yeah.
it a little bit, and that's part of how I do things. And that person's job is to make sure that they don't fly so close to the sun that they put themselves in unrecoverable situations, and to surround themselves with a team that, you know, has like the real on them. And so I think, you know, this
Yeah.
is where I always just come back to like, you got to understand yourself.
So this question actually comes from Ryan Delk, who's a friend of ours, and you know him as well. He said, you should ask Jack about what it was like building Lattice throughout like peak ZERP when there is money that's flowing,
Yeah.
0 interest rates,
Yeah.
versus when that started to change more recently, and some of the lessons you've learned on how company building has changed
Yeah.
during those 2 periods. Anything come to mind there that's worth sharing?
I actually did not enjoy 2021 personally, even though like growth was awesome, money was flowing, like everything's ripping, your customers are doubling their head count, everything feels on some sense like easy mode. My experience of that was not that it was particularly fun.
Why?
I was like, this is like, you know, it's like everything's going so crazy, it's exciting. But so much of the realness in that year was lost. I think for companies where the real digging deep for insights and product market fit, I think some of that was lost because budgets were like infinite and you could just sell anything.
You get sloppy.
You get sloppy. I think like, you know, I contrast ZERP time with a really hard period we had when we were 50 employees, 2018. We were trying to raise a Series B and we couldn't. And we like instituted this sort of like, you know, extreme sort of carefulness on spend. We called it wartime. We weren't hiring. We started we would talk, you know, internally about the fact that we should think of each hire we make as a failure because it means that we couldn't figure out
That's
how.
Henry Ward, I think, originally, a Carta guy. Yeah, anyway. Yes.
Yeah, it's like there's 50 of us here. We need to do X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. And
With
the 50 of
that.
us couldn't figure it out
Yeah.
because we're not good enough. So we had to hire the 51st person to help us. And that's not quite true, of course, but I think that instilled a mentality, which was really different than, you know, ZERPland in
Yeah.
tech, where everybody's like, I want to hire the biggest team possible. And it was very hard to tell an org that they shouldn't keep hiring because everything looked so good. And so you're like, you're right, there are too many leads and your sales reps are like, you know, massively drowning and all this stuff. And so I think to me, there were also employment dynamics that I think got really unhealthy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I think the power balance, like Lattice stands for in many ways a different power balance between employees and employers than we've ever had in history. And I love that. And I think that's amazing. I think it's good for the world. And I want that to be the future. But it went way too far in 2021 where you got to a place where people were not behaving and thinking in respectful ways to the companies. There were these trades, these sort of...
There's like contempt between the two of them a little bit.
Yeah, and because of the supply-demand dynamic for talent in 2021, when you were, for example, doing recruiting, I found recruiting unpleasant because instead of getting to know somebody in an authentic way over multiple weeks and then making a considered decision together of are we the right teammates, it was, hey, great to meet you. I have 9 offers and I'm going to decide by tomorrow. So I know you've got a whole process, but like we're doing all the interviews today, and then you can submit an offer, and my offers are enormous.
Funny, that's how investing worked too in 2021.
And I think that's not that fun.
No.
And it's not.
And it doesn't lead to great decisions.
It doesn't lead to great decisions. I don't think it leads to, even the people who, the side of that trade that feels like they're getting a great deal.
No.
I don't think they're getting a
short
They're
term.
not.
It's a
bad
short
for
term
both.
thing.
It's bad for both.
Yeah.
So I didn't love 2021.
Yeah. Makes tons of sense. It's probably, Sterling and I were so excited about this convo because the whole concept behind the IO podcast is there's this fun relationship between investor and operator where they tie together, where they differ. And in some ways, you're like the perfect example because you started to invest while you were the operator, while you're the founder CEO. Can you share that story real quick? And did people say they wanted you to invest, or did you go fundraise? And then we'll get into how you left to do your own firm. But where did this start, this IO thing?
It started, I guess, 2019-ish, something like that is when I started investing. And I think it's a really fun, there's a couple things that I really like about, that I really enjoyed about doing both. One is you have this really cool vantage point where as the founder of a company, you're seeing all these products that your teams are using and buying. And occasionally you'll hear about a company that somebody on your team is like, oh man, we just like used X and it was awesome and we loved it and it did this and I just heard about it. They just graduated from YC and we're using it and all my other friends at these other companies are using it. And that's like that is a signal that you get running a company that's very hard to get if you're an investor. And then you meet those teams and you get to meet those founders, like I would meet tons of founding teams running Lattice who were coming to, basically selling to us, but using me as this champion to get buy-in because they were selling to, a manager or something like that. And they would want to show me their product and talk about their roadmap so that I'd be supportive. Obviously, that's how it goes. And I would be like, these teams are awesome. You can tell kind of how they're thinking. And so that was how it started, was basically meeting people in the course of business that we were either buying software from or that we just like.
And were you angel investing, just your own money to start?
Yeah.
How did that evolve, or was that always the case? It was your own money?
No, I did that for a while, and then towards the end of Lattice, I raised some like outside money.
Got it.
And scaled it up a little bit when I was starting to sort of know that we had gotten to a place where Lattice had enough execs that I was able to work a more balanced life there. But I am somebody who likes to be working all the time, so rather than being a smart person and using that time for exercise and relaxing and reading and living a normal life, I just gave myself new work to do. And then the other thing is I just loved it. Like I just got a lot of energy from it. Like from the beginning of doing it, I always just enjoyed it. I liked getting to think about new businesses. I liked learning. I learned, people were always like, oh yeah, I want to learn from like a growth stage founder. And I was like, I learned a ton from these seed stage founders because tons of them are way better at a thing than I am, and I could see that easily.
So did investing while you were running Lattice make you a better CEO of Lattice, a worse CEO of Lattice, or no impact?
So my take on this whole question of like, does it help, is I think it does help. It's better than it's better than playing golf, and it is worse than other things you could be doing to become better at a CEO.
Such as
meeting with CEOs who are further along and like learning and asking them an hour's worth of questions, or spending time developing more relationships with more executive recruiters so you've got more options when you're ready for your next exec, or studying a business that is related but different to yours closely.
Isn't that what investing, like what's funny is I actually think you do all of those things when you invest.
Sure.
You can invest in companies bigger than you,
it's
obviously.
just less directed.
Okay.
But people are humans, we're not robots.
Yeah.
There are some people who are able to just make their work about only the thing that they're working on, and in all of their spare time, they don't think about spare time because all they want to do is get better at their exact craft. For me, I'm not built that way.
Yeah.
I'm a person who needs to take breaks and like relax and whatever. And I was like, oh, it's lucky at least that what I like is that my hobby is going to be startups, because that is more helpful than my hobby being video games or golf.
Yeah.
But it's less helpful than if I was equally happy to take that if you gave me 3 hours and said, just get better at Lattice, I wouldn't go invest in a security company.
Sure. Fair enough.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But you obviously liked it, it sounds like. I mean, you're calling it like your golf equivalent, which means it's a fun thing for you. So Did it turn pretty quickly to like, hey, I think I'm going to invest on my next job? And then how did that evolve to your own fund? I'd love to get that story.
Not super quickly. Like, you know, I didn't think too much of it for a while, but then at some point I was like, I love this. And I just, you know, over time I realized I really loved it. And, you know, probably there was a moment in time where I was like, I also just like love running a company. And I did even to the end really enjoy it. I just, you know, at some point it flipped and I got the clarity, but there was probably a time when I was like, this might just be an angel investing thing for me for a long time. But I was pretty sure I would always do investing in some form.
Okay, so then when did you decide to make the leap, start your own firm?
Full
Got
time.
a great name for it, by the way.
Thanks.
Like, yeah, that's awesome.
It was like a process, like, you know, for a little while towards the end, like it was never something I was going to rush and do quickly. Like I loved and love Lattice so much. And like, you know, it's like,
Well, it's your baby.
it's my baby. And like you build this thing. I love what it stands for. I love the market. I love our customers. I love the people. I love the people who used to work there, like all these things. And so I was never going to do it quickly. And so it was like a process, and it's not a quick process to go through this, because like finding somebody's hard, but also you got to pick the right time. And when I first wanted to make a change, it wasn't necessarily the right time. And so I was patient through that. You know, I took a long-term view on this. I'm like, once I was like, okay, I'm ready to have my next chapter, I was like, I'm going to take a 30-year view on this. And I'm 35 right now. And I'm like, 65-year-old me will prefer that I did this the right way, even if it takes me a couple years. And so that was like my lens on it. And I wasn't in a rush because it wasn't like I didn't like doing it. I was just like, I'm no longer so deeply in love. And I think that like this company deserves that, or any company deserves that from the CEO.
Yeah, makes
So that was
sense.
it.
And so to you, the right way of doing it was wait until you have the right set of LPs.
Don't rush
into it.
Find the right CEO candidate. Get the team in the best spot.
The right way to do it, I wasn't even thinking about the fund. I was thinking about Lattice.
Right, for Lattice, yeah.
It was, when do I have the right exec team in place? It was, when have we when have I done the product sort of bets that I think will be much harder for a professional CEO to do, not because of anything that they don't, you know, that they're not good enough to do it, but just because, you know, there's, you know, a moral authority from a
We've
founder.
got 10 years of insights and intuition.
Yeah, and like your board and investors are going to be more supportive of a founder doing something crazy looking. So it was more that kind of thing. So it was getting Lattice to a place where I was like, now I can believe that a great CEO can take this company further than I could. And then it was about finding the right person. And then I was like, I'll figure out the investing thing on the other side. Yeah.
Got it.
And what's it been like? So now you're doing it. You got a fund.
Yeah.
$150 million. You got a team. Like what's it like?
It's so fun. I really, really love it. I'm like, I was just saying this to my wife the other day. I'm like the happiest I've been in
That's
like
awesome.
a long time.
Why? Why is it so much fun? Why is it
It's
great?
just so good. Like everything about it. Like I love founder. I like really like just plainly love founders. And I just like love the energy and the effort and the care and the looking for something new and the fundamental trying to be different and to create something. It's just all just like so good to me. I love the fact that you get to think about different markets and companies all the time. And so you get to learn, like, you know, we'll sprint on a company. I'm finding that I really enjoy going deep on a company and like learning about the market and learning about like that's really fun for me. And that was really fun for me at Lattice too. And by the way, I think we can talk about this later, but I think this is one of the big overlaps between investing and being a founder is like the commerciality and the looking for markets that are worth pursuing. I think that's like a big common sort of piece of work. And then I just like, I don't know, I think in some ways too, the whole endeavor of investing is this just like fundamentally hopeful and optimistic thing. And so I'm spending my days being optimistic, and that just feels good.
The energy of somebody who's looking like they've got a thing, and it's just infectious, right? You sit in a pitch, and like the first pitch, you're almost always like, oh, they're gonna set the world on fire. You just like, you can't help but be perpetually optimistic, and if your day to day looks like that,
totally. And I think like what I really enjoy the most is when you know there's that pitch moment I totally love too. And then you also have these moments where you get to work with a team that it's really working and they really found something. and they've got that secret. And there's something about that secret when a team knows something the world doesn't yet, and where they're doing great because of an explainable insight. I'm just like, nothing beats it.
Yeah.
And so working with the teams on the other side.
So what is the overlap like in skill set? How did being a founder prepare you for this job? And then what's different?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a Venn diagram. I think there's some things that have no relation. And then there's some parts of the work that I think are extremely similar. You know, the thing that I think is the most important in the overlap bucket is that to be a great CEO or to be a great investor, you are fundamentally a talent hunter. And you're looking for people that are underappreciated, undervalued by the market, who are, maybe they're early in their career and they have a long way to grow, or maybe they're people who are super proven and you're just trying to figure out how to convince them. And those two different motions are the same, you know, whether you're recruiting an experienced exec or, betting on somebody new, whether you're trying to get, somebody who's got term sheets from everybody in the world to take your money, or whether you're betting on somebody who nobody else wants to bet on. But I think that talent hunting is extremely fundamental to both, and I've experienced that as very similar.
Cool.
And I think that's central. I think this commerciality thing and this, there's some people who just they can just smell where the money's at, and they just know a good business when they see it, and they see an opportunity, and they can tell that's a good product. People are going to like that, but no one's going to pay. There's some founders who are they are just so dialed on where the value is going to accrue, and it's just intuitive to them. And I think, and this is not just founders, this is also true of execs, employees at companies, but this commerciality thing and deciding what markets are interesting, where to spend time, what's going to play out. I was making I was trying my best to make those calls every year or two at Lattice as we built a new product. That was the essential question is where's the money at? And where's the problem worth solving that people will really pay for at scale? And I think that is what understanding a good market kind of looks like. And that doesn't mean that it has to have a lot of money now. It's understanding, here's a trend. Those are actually the best, of course, is, here's a trend where it's small, but it's white hot and everybody's going to follow. And so I think those are in common. And then there's some things that are super unrelated. Being a founder, you also become a throughput machine and a decision-making machine. That's a super different muscle than being an investor, where you're quite the opposite, where you're actually fighting the urge to make decisions all the time, and you ought to be making way fewer. Where to be a great founder, you need this unbelievable sense of agency and control, and your hands on the wheel, and everything that happens is your problem and your responsibility. Versus as an investor, obviously that's not how you are. You're you are an advisor, in the earpiece, but the founder's in the cockpit. And those are different muscles too, and those are different skills to be the player versus be the coach and all that. So I think there's just, you break it down to the bodies of work. There's some that's really similar, some is not related.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So I want to ask you about some of the stuff you've tweeted out, some of the frameworks you've shared. One of my favorites, by the way, and I've shared this a bunch of times, is your hierarchy of investors. And we'll link to it in the show notes for everyone. And but basically, you give 6 levels of investors, and I don't know if you remember all 6 of them, but the bottom level is actively sabotaging portfolio companies, and the top level is you have sufficient context and experience to be an ongoing, valuable member of a CEO's team, and then everything in between that. Yeah. Why did you tweet that? What is this from experience? I'm sure you've seen different types of investors. What % of people make it to that level 6 investor? And tell us more about where this came from, this insight.
I don't know if it came from any one particular place other than, just being around a bunch of companies over years and just kind of thinking it through. And this is something Vinod Khosla said that seems very true. I can't remember what the number he said was, but
most add to subtract value. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And some do nothing, and that actually doing nothing is not bad.
Yeah.
And then being helpful from there is good. And I think about some of my highest bang for buck investors. I would put them in that second to highest category, where they're not going to be in the weeds. They didn't write a big check. They're not on your board. They're not going to know all this stuff. But when you call them, they come in and they deliver value and they swing hard. And
So the second highest is have contribute in a big way for a small number of key moments.
Yes.
You're saying some people can make it that high.
Alad Gil was this for me.
Okay.
He had invested in our Series A, didn't write a huge check, but he was part of it, and like the value that he delivered was very high whenever I called him on the moments when it mattered. And it didn't mean that every, week we were talking multiple times about the company and the ins and outs, but he knew enough and he was in a position to be able to be super helpful and was willing to do that and always picked up the phone. And I think that's actually pretty aspirational.
Yeah. Very few get there.
For sure. And I'm sure he's a 6 if he's on the board.
Yeah.
And so, but not everybody can be all of these to everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think generally speaking, it's very hard to be a 6 unless you're like on the board. Like, to do that durably, I think really requires being in the mix. But yeah.
Can you give a quick example of what Elad did that was high impact? Did he find a recruit? Did he close a can? What did he do?
Oh, it was probably, there's a wide range, but I think the things, I'll speak in generalities, and I think he's done all these things, but speaking in generalities, the types of things that I think fall into this bucket, that type of investor, not that type of investor as a person, but that relationship between a particular investor and a particular company in one context, obviously knowing both have many contexts. I think the things that can help a lot are helping with fundraisers in like a material way, like making critical introductions at the right time. It can be selling a candidate, like selling a big deal candidate for the company, and certain profiles of investors can really make a difference on that. It can be giving really important advice when you're just like stuck and you just like need a trusted consigliere to talk to unstuck you. It can be like connections at the level of important PR connections, an important investment banker, an important acquisition potential, those kinds of things. So it's like that level of thing where it actually doesn't take that person much time.
Yeah.
Like it might be
it's who they are in their network that they're able to pull that for you.
Yeah, and they might be able to just deliver the value in one 30-minute conversation.
Yeah.
One of the other tweets you've had that I think is very relevant to company building today has to do with like compound startups. And I think this might have been in like 2021, but you were talking about what Parker's doing at Rippling and how with today, there's enough money and the technology is good enough, like you can build, like point solutions aren't going to be it going forward. Maybe like expand a little bit on that and how you think, how you talked about, you have to have a customer for 10 years.
Yeah.
What kind of software do you have to build today to keep a customer for 10 years? And how's that different from the previous decade?
Yeah. And you think about like where we are, like let's take AI out for a second. And you think about where we are in sort of just the deployment of software and cloud.
Yep.
And like where might we be in that S-curve? It seems like we might be like reasonably far up the curve. Yeah. Like there's still new things happening. There's great new companies that are always going to be built. But like a lot of categories have many SaaS options at this point. And many subcategories have lots of SaaS options at this point. And it's not that expensive to build the software anymore. And it's quick. And the products are high quality and all these things. And so sometimes, obviously, you'll see these very special companies that build one thing that is really important and they do it really well. And that thing can run very far. Zoom is an example. Like, it's a big category. And, there had not been as good of options before. There was like WebEx and whatever. But like, it's a hard product to build. Everybody uses it. It's viral by nature. And it goes very far. Slack, similar. One product goes very far. Figma on some level is a version of this, although there's nuance to it over time, but one product is able to go very far. Notion, you can kind of keep going on. But those are outliers. Those are rare situations, and those are, at least all of those examples were PLG. They're infrastructure that if you get it, everybody's going to use it. And those all had step function changes to the quality of them, and they're like in pretty important productivity areas. And so that's one type of company. And then you take other companies, let's say, CRM or HR or finance or marketing or whatever. Yeah. And you think about a buyer and you think about their experience as a buyer. They've got 50 things to look at. They've probably got a tech stack that's already 15, 20 layers deep. They pull up a market map of SaaS. They go on G2. They're like, I can't even see straight. And how important really is it for one part of their stack to be 50% better or 30% better Or is it more important for it to be tightly integrated, for me to have fewer vendors I have to navigate, for the data to talk to each other, for the company to be reliable, for the company to be well-funded and to be secure and to be around forever? Mm-hmm. And so you think it through and you see, in my opinion, that we're at a phase when, if you can, many more categories will be dominated in the end by a compound startup, by somebody doing lots and lots of things around some system of record, and system of record gives you the right to win. And, in some ways. And I just think that's the natural conclusion of where we are, is kind of how I see it.
I couldn't agree more. It's like the least interesting thing to me at this point is when, and there are exceptions, but as a rule, it's just like the point solution, the software, it's not going to win. It's not going to keep a customer for 10 years. It's too easy to build stuff, and someone can always build it cheaper. And like it just, I think you've got it. I think you've got it spot on.
Yeah, and what's hard to see sometimes is, companies have multiple acts, and so you can still bet on. You're not betting. You can invest in something that's like a point solution, and that can be a smart investment, and that can end up doing great because companies and founders have many acts. And sometimes that first wedge gives you access
to Act 2.
Yeah, it's like getting on the climbing wall, and you got on there, and now you can reach something you couldn't reach from the ground, and you get more capital, and you get you get more people, and you get customer relationships, and you get momentum flowing.
So here's a question for you: how often do they have that vision to start out versus you find the next thing as you're climbing? How do you think about that as an investor?
I think both have happened. I think it's better when you've got the version where you can see the whole climb.
Yeah.
Because if you just let's stick with the climbing analogy. If you knew all the moves from the beginning, you're going to make efficient, smart moves from the beginning.
Yeah.
If you don't know the moves, you're going to make some errors. You're going to go off to the side. You're going to get tired. You're going to come back down, and that's weird. And then you contorted yourself. So, and I think that really happens.
Yeah.
So it's
a damn good analogy, Sterling. You just come up with that now.
I think he did.
Oh, you did.
We did it. We co-created.
I like that.
I think that it's both can work, and I think there's trade-offs. And I think the person who is doing the more iterative, let's say the more YC approach, where you just solve one problem and then you move from there, versus the let's say more how I think the way that Keith Raboy invests, which I think is brilliant too, is the whole movie needs to be there, and you invest in a movie from the beginning, and you call the cast of characters, and that's how a great company gets built. There's probably examples of both. I think all things being equal, I think the Keith version is better, but I think there's going to be great examples of both.
Yeah. So now let's throw AI into the mix, and you have this awesome post. I think you just screenshotted your Apple Notes, killer apps, and you actually just covered some of what you said in that, but around a point solution versus a system of record, and how AI is shuffling everything. Can you summarize kind of your thoughts here on why AI is now an opportunity for new killer apps, and how this might evolve in your mind? How are you thinking about it?
So I think what's interesting is in software, all the really big, valuable, public, enduring SaaS companies are, for the most part, are a system of record plus an ecosystem of applications, some of which are theirs, some of which are integrations, some of which you can pick your other. But that's directionally the shape. And you go through the list of all these companies, Workday and ServiceNow and Salesforce, and you go on, and that's kind of how a lot of them look.
Yep.
There's some other versions, but that's kind of how they look. It's really hard to challenge an incumbent of those levels of dominance head on. Let's just take Salesforce, because it's an example we all know. HubSpot did a great job. They didn't get there straight by going into CRM, and they're still, all these years later, they're still fighting, and they're doing an amazing job. But, they started with applications and marketing automation stuff, and then they backed into a CRM at 100 million of ARR, and then they targeted the SMB, and it was this crafty backdoor to get in there.
Totally.
Yep.
And you think about Salesforce now, and you think about, let's take AI out. How are you gonna compete with Salesforce? It's really hard. It's really, really hard. You have to have something really special happen. And what's interesting about the potential with AI, in my view, and what I meant by that post, was what it will do is it will let people get on that rock climbing wall, because it will give access to new killer apps that can get a lot of scale in faster ways than previously.
So more back doors open up.
There's more back doors.
Okay.
And so people can parlay backdoors into a HubSpot type of situation.
I do think it's funny because I think that's going to require a lot of the seeing the movie and seeing the path that you're going to climb. Otherwise, you'll think you've got it because you've got this killer app and it's a hockey stick. But then you're just going to get whacked if you aren't making the right sequential moves to build something that's more enduring.
For sure. Yeah, and these startups are not easy to build when you are not just taking one risk up front and then writing product market fit out, but you're taking a risk and you're taking another risk and another one, and you just keep going. And so I think that's right. I think more experienced founders have that advantage. There's an advantage inexperienced people have, and I'm all, generally I'm all for like slope over experience. I'm like mega, convicted.
It's too much to ask for both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and then those people do exist, and those are in fact the best. They're just unbelievably hard to get.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I think that's right. I think that's right, that it'll be hard to pull those off, but this is where the potential is. Yeah. But this is why, like what Brett Taylor's doing with Sierra is like super interesting because he's got this really cool start going, and there's a lot of potential behind it if you can get on the wall with something like that and then parlay. So that's kind of what I have in mind.
And there's not, it takes these big gargantuan shifts to open up even the opportunity. Otherwise, Salesforce kind of sits there unpenetrable until there's some shift, right? Sure. And AI is one of those shifts.
Yeah.
Sterling, are there any other hot takes or frameworks we should dive into before we wrap up the last few?
Just while we're on the AI thing, what's the future look like? What is 10 years out in San Francisco like? What does it look like?
Oh, I don't even know what 10 weeks from now is going to look like. I'm the wrong person. I'm like not. I don't. I think very few people, and I do not put myself in this camp. But the people who I think can see the future better than a coin flip, repeatedly, I'm like, that's a small group, and I don't see myself as one of them. So that's like just not to avoid the question. I'm just like, I don't think I can say anything on this that is anything other than me taking my best finger in the wind guess. I think maybe one thing I'll say is I personally believe that whether or not the models got better from here, that there's still a lot of interesting, important work that can be done for applications taking advantage of today's state-of-the-art model.
Yep.
Yeah. So I can at least say that I think nothing more could happen on the model side.
And we've still got.
And I think there's a ton of potential left. Yeah. I see it that way. I don't know that I think that it's infinite based on where we are right now, but I think there are cool new companies and valuable products that can be built on top of what exists now. And I think that will lead to interesting opportunities and backdoors to be created. So I can at least say that.
Yeah, love it.
I would regret not asking you to tell everyone listening about Generate. Can you tell us about the program you run, who should be interested in it, and why'd you do it? Tell us about it.
So it was like a program we did for like the last 2 months. It was 11 companies that were all sort of like late seed, early A stage, all like SaaS companies. With like a little bit of an AI bent to varying degrees.
And is that what you're going to focus on, is B2B investments only, or are you going to do both?
No, I just wanted the program to have like a cohesion so that the founders could get sort of more value from one another. Because, like my experience going through these programs myself was that so much of the value comes from the community. Yeah. And so I just wanted there to be good alignment versus a consumer founder and a hardware founder and a SaaS founder being like, I don't know what to talk about with each other. And also all the speakers were, related to that. So I just wanted some cohesion to it. That was really the main reason. Although I do invest a lot in B2B, but that was the reason for the program. The truth is I thought it'd be really fun to do. Like the people who we had speak, I've heard them all speak, but I get a lot of joy from, like we were talking about before we did this, like I like getting to go and sit down for an hour and ask people questions that it wouldn't be like socially acceptable to ask them these questions over a coffee because it's just weird. Yep. But I like hearing those stories and I like getting asked those questions.
Someone will have you put a camera in front of people. We can put it on a podcast and it's not weird.
Yeah, exactly. But you like go to a coffee with somebody. It's like, tell me how you like got, how you broke through on that second product. And they're like, dude, we just, I just drinking a cappuccino here. So I liked that and I thought it would be fun to do. And I also think like I'm in month 6 of trying, ambitiously to build something. And one of the advantages I can have is like try stuff and like see what sticks and see what I can learn. And so there's also just a sense of like, I am biased in favor of experimentation. And when there's something that I think has no downside, potential upside and sounds fun to me, I'm like, sign me up. Yeah.
So do you think it'll be a recurring thing, or was it a one-off?
No, I'd like to do it again.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I think one more on this is, do you agree that in order for investors to really outperform, they're going to have to figure out a way to, Sterling and I call this manufacture your own returns. You're going to have to find ways to either start, incubate, or accelerate companies. And is that part of the motivation to do this program, or do you disagree with that conclusion? Before we had the podcast, which is like prices are very high, and if you're just competing on price,
Where's
and
the
investing,
alpha at and the stuff that,
Yep.
if you can't manufacture your own, can you find enough alpha in the stuff that everybody else can see?
Right. It's a great question. I do generally think that we're at a part of the meta cycle where there's more value in being a capital taker than a capital provider in technology. I think like enough VCs and dollars have flowed in that's just like where we are. The Generate companies are all, they were all formed and existing and had raised seed rounds. So there was no creation there. I don't think it's the only way is to build I don't think the only way to have enduring returns is to build your own companies and to incubate your own companies. But I do think it is a very valuable way for the people who can do it, and it leads to a lot of differentiation and a lot of ability to create value that doesn't exist otherwise. I think you need a way, I think you need something proprietary that is unique to you, that a whole class of people will work with you over others on. And there's different ways to do that. You can just be, somebody who goes and finds things that are unfindable or that are just that others don't see, or you get there earlier. You can be one of the most premium firms that the very best of the best will truly
seek
work
you
with.
out. Yep.
You can create your own companies. So I don't think it's the only way, but I think it's a very good way for those who can do it. That said, I think for those that can do it, that is doing a lot of work, in that sentence. I think most people can't do it.
Yeah.
And I think not only do you waste money, but you waste a lot of focus and time, and an unbelievable amount of work goes into it. What Mike Spicer does is
that's
unbelievable. But that
There's one of him.
But most people who wake up tomorrow and try to do what Mike Spicer does are gonna it's gonna go poor. They'd be better off doing nothing.
Yep.
Because they're gonna just spend all their time not building a company.
So what way is Alt Capital going to do? What are you going to do?
We're not planning to build our own companies. We're doing early stage investing, seed and A. And I think at the moment, the goal is just, right now for this first fund, all I'm keyed in on is just partner with the very best founders we possibly can in whatever ways we can, and that good things will come from that. I think over time, and as as the market matures, I do think that considering these kinds of things is important, but I think for right now, the single-minded focus is just getting business with the best people we can.
And I think your product is going to be a very recently successful founder who's now an investor. That's different from somebody who might have started a company 20, 30 years ago. There is differentiation there. And so it'll be a fun thing to watch.
Yeah.
All right. Should we wrap up with our final three?
Yep.
All right. So the questions we ask everybody, I'll give the first one. Who is the investor you admire most?
There's a lot that I admire in different ways, but just top of mind, I think what Josh Kushner and Thrive have done is super cool. You think about the ethos that they've built, the speed at which they've
It's built. Like a decade. They went from nothing to this massive franchise.
Yeah, and the founders that they've partnered with.
Yeah. And what the founders say about them.
Yeah.
You being one of them.
Yeah, I think back to what he and Thrive have done for me, and obviously, Miles was, an early investor, and Vince is part of it. But I think back to, they as a firm backed us at the seed, the A, all the way through all the rounds through the F, and were unbelievably supportive. They were great board members. They were an incredibly supportive firm, and on top of that, Josh also helped put me in business on investing, and was always there, kind of like a Lod, was always there to pick up a call and was high value in those situations. and was kind of quietly and humbly just building this amazing business while he did it with incredible talent. You look at the talent he's hired, it's crazy. So I just have a huge amount of respect for what they've done, and just the sort of the approach to building, and this just like this unbelievable helpfulness that they just embody, I think is like what like Silicon Valley should be all about. And like I've not experienced it at a higher level than what they've done.
Wow. It's very cool.
It's very cool.
And like firsthand experience, you know, so that's cool. So second question is the same question, but for entrepreneur. Like who's the entrepreneur you most admire?
Again, like there's so many that come to mind, and so this is always hard, but just to like pick somebody with a particular trait that I really admire. I think Dylan at Figma, I think is like, he was always an example to me of like the type of leader who's building something both like ambitiously in a really high quality way, but doing it, staying the kind of person that I wanted to stay as I aspired to keep growing as a CEO and a founder. You know, like I think there's people who like, I think you can like lead with love or fear, you know, that kind of dichotomy. I think he really leads with love. I think he leads with like with a strong version that has intensity around things like love, creativity, you know, loyalty, you know, connection. And I think that sphere of things is a big motivating bucket. And this is not to say that there's a different bucket of traits that I think, and you know, most people have some of both, but demanding, intense, forceful, you know, some elements of like, you know, fear, intensity. Those things aren't bad if they don't go too far. It's just not who I am. And so Dylan to me is always just an example of somebody operating both at like a world-class level, but in the sort of spirit that I aspire to.
Awesome.
And then the last question is like, what makes you tick? Why are you the way you are? You know, from St. Louis to here, and like, what is it that's driving you?
You know, it's funny. I was thinking about this on, you know, my ride up to San Francisco this morning, because I saw, you know, that you were going to ask, and I don't think I've ever had a great answer to this. And as I reflect on it, I think about what traits I have, and like what I'm kind of driven by. And I think I'm like extremely happy by nature, and I can be happy in like kind of any context. And I'm like, I think I could have worked in other fields and been happy. Like, I think I could have done a bunch of jobs and like enjoyed my life. And like, I can be happy by myself. I could be happy with friends. I kind of just came out positive, you know, by sort of temperament.
We talked about kids early. It's like, you come as you are.
You just come as you are. Yeah. And I think I just came out that way, and I kind of am that way. And so the funny thing about that is I don't feel like what that, I think some people are driven by like a certain itchiness and a certain just like a chip on their shoulder, or I got to prove the world wrong. And I think I'm less like that. And I think I am more, whatever's in front of me, I'm super happy to take that on as my thing. And I think I'm also just like, I have a lot of energy and drive sort of by nature, and I've always been that way too. But I'm kind of cool with whatever that thing is. And so I'm happy to sort of take up whatever's in front of me just kind of fully. And I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but I think I've always been this way. And, you know, I think what that leads to is anything within reasonable constraints, I can very happily go all in on and just enjoy it. But I think I've just got like I'm going to push hard on whatever thing I'm doing. I wouldn't be happy sitting around. But I weirdly don't have like a chip on my shoulder I can point to, or a wrong I'm trying to right. Yeah. And that probably has some limitations to it. But that's just how I am.
Very
awesome. This is a fun combo, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
We, maybe it's recency bias, but I think this like covered some of the most important topics for every founder. I think it's a perfect encapsulation of what we're trying to do, and I think it could be one of our best.
Great.
So thank you.
Sweet. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. This was fun.
Just finished our about an hour-long conversation with Jack Altman. We're in his office, all capital here. Sterling, what's your knee-jerk?
There's always something to talking to a founder.
Yeah, it's
and someone who's
different.
done the whole journey.
Yeah.
There's a clarity of thought and frameworks that get developed only one way, and that's from the actual process of going through it all. So I think it's going to be remarkably valuable to people at sort of all stages of company building, everything from pre-product market fit to post, and then even into like the investing side of things.
Yeah, it's easy for me to get like nerd out about this stuff, but I actually got chills during some of his story with Lattice because he was teaching like 10 of the things that other guests have talked about in one case study with an exceptional startup that like people have heard of and probably have used. And here it's like Henry Ward at Carter. Like you're learning these things that it's truth. All of it was truth. How to find product market fit, how to search for desperation, how to do the compound startup thing. It was just awesome.
What's the difference between building features because you're trying to find it versus building features because someone needs it? Like there's just very specific examples that he gave that I think you only get one way. You only figure out those truths one way.
100%. Another takeaway for me was just who he is. I mean, he's a unique, clear thinker, incredibly good communicator.
Yeah.
Like maybe one of the best communicators we've had on. And like one of the most likable guys too. So it's like it's clear that whatever he's going to touch is going to be pretty special.
Yeah, I'm excited for the LPs of All Capital. I'm excited for the founders of All Capital. So fascinating conversation. I think everyone's going to love it.
Me too.